Hey everyone, it's AZ with the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. Today I sat down for episode number 55 live and in person with my friend and coworker, Joe Lissman. Joe and I talked a lot about his long career and how he has now transitioned into being a maintenance supervisor for all of our fire apparatus. I know you're going to enjoy this one. Thanks for listening and have a great day. Thank you for joining me on the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, AZ. I find the research and resources and then provide the fire service with the so what, now what, to ensure the health and well-being of every member of our profession. Together, let's thrive. I don't care. What are you doing? All right. Hey, podcast listeners, it's AZ, and we are back for episode number 55 of the Fire Rescue Wellness Podcast, and I'm here with my friend and coworker, Joe Lissman. Joe, say hello to the people.
Hello, the people.
Hello, the people. As I mentioned, Joe and I are coworkers, so I do want to give the disclaimer that everything we talk about today is our own opinion. It doesn't reflect that of our employer. And just a little backstory. So, Joe's been on, when did you get hired?
96. February of 96, yeah.
So Joe was a salty veteran by the time I got hired. We were on different shifts, really didn't run into each other much until the year we were both going to get promoted. And so I was on black shift. He was on gold shift. And at our department, they mix things up. They don't promote us on our own shift, or at least they try not to. So I went to gold shift kind of voluntarily to save someone else because I knew I was going to get promoted there anyway. And Joe and I were medic partners for like 3 months.
Yeah.
Lots of adventures.
Yeah. We were both getting promoted and knew it was happening. And so it was kind of a short time syndrome, but that was an interesting 3 months to be sure.
Well, and you know, we had, at that time, we had a captain at our station who was like a super fun guy to work for. And he just kept everything down to a dull roar. And we just kind of kept turning up the volume. I don't know.
Yeah, it was fun. Do your job. And we did. We were busy. But yeah, that was a good way to end the blue shirt portion of my career. I think you probably felt the same way. It was fun.
Yeah, we had some other characters. We'll call them cast of characters at our station. So it was very fun. But before we get too far, I want the listeners to know, who is Joe Lissman?
Who am I? Well, I am, let's see, I got hired in 96, so I'm looking at 27 plus years in the fire service. I worked at a part-time department before I got on where we both work now. I'm married. I have been married for 22 years. I got 2 kids, a junior in high school who's a ball player, a sophomore in high school. That's my son, and then a sophomore in high school, my daughter, who's a runner. She is a track athlete and a maniac cross-country athlete. Although next year she's talking about maybe making a switch and doing some team sports.
Shut up.
Yeah.
Which ones?
Volleyball and basketball.
What would she give up?
Cross, maybe. Yeah.
No.
That's what she's kind of been talking about. And whatever, kid, do your thing. You know, we want you to enjoy what you're doing and have fun. And so
I could not be more shocked right now.
Well, she's also almost 16, so she's going to get her license this month. And, you know, they talk a lot, so we'll see what happens when it's time to make a decision. But it's fun watching them do their thing, and so yeah, that's me in a nutshell. I was born in Seattle, Washington, and moved out here when I was 12 to the town that we both work in. Went to school there, and when it was time to start taking fire department tests, after I decided that's what I wanted to do, which was in high school, I was fortunate enough to get high enough on our test. On the list I was on, and got hired very young, and I've had a great career. So it's been a ride.
The station photos that we have at our station, I actually didn't mention this. So once we did get promoted and we finally landed at our stations, we were the station officer of the same station on different shifts. But anyway, I digress. The station photos at our shift are still, I think, from like a year or two after you got hired. You look like a baby.
There's one of them out there where I'm getting sworn in. I think it's at Station 5 there. And I was 22 years old. I mean, I was a kid. I was a baby a long time ago.
Holy moly.
It's fun to look at those, but it's also a lot of fun to see the younger generation come in and make it their place. You know, it's time for that turnover to happen. And that's pretty cool.
I feel like they're puppies, though.
They are.
So much energy.
There's a lot of energy, yeah, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of, I don't know, you just get to the point where you look at the younger folks, and they're very smart, all very smart and very energetic people, but you do realize that they don't know a whole lot. You know, it's like, wow, you don't understand how this works. Okay, kid, come here, let's talk about this. And that's good. I mean, that's just the natural order of things, I suppose. But it's an eye-opener. It started happening to me about, 10 or 15 years ago, when you're like, oh, man, these new guys don't know how to do this stuff. They don't know how to do these particulars. And then you got to jump in and help them. So,
well, we're going to get to actually a lot of that jumping in and helping in a minute. But first, the official questions. What sets your soul on fire?
Oh.
Ugh.
What sets my soul on fire? Wow. Oof. I suppose if it was a one-word answer, I'd say learning.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. I think that's probably the most satisfying thing in my life, in terms of a professional life, is looking forward to learning what is behind the next door, you know, in whatever area of your life or career you're talking about. It's quite something to be able to say, wow, I don't know either. I mean, you're talking about young people just now and the newer generation of firefighters and stuff, but there's a whole world of stuff out there that every day you can have an opportunity to learn something, whether it's about leadership or something physical or it's some tactic or some new whatever. That never stops, you know. And you hear a lot of old people say the same thing. You know, you see those articles every once in a while about a 90-year-old went and got a degree at a college, and that's pretty cool. Like, yeah, it never ends. And so every day there's an opportunity to learn something about whatever you like in your life. Baseball, and that's one part of my life that I enjoy, and the work and family and whatever. Hey, there's a lot of great stuff to learn out there, dig into, and then start reading and find a book and find an internet article and
I love
go
that.
down those rabbit holes, and all of a sudden, wow, I just learned a whole lot. That's pretty cool.
Well, and I don't want to give it away, but I think that may be how you got to where you are now. So we'll revisit that in just a moment. So the last question, hard question, bright, shiny light bulb. How are you changing the world?
How am I changing the world? Well, I am a parent. I'm a dad, and my wife's a mom, and I think that's the greatest impact that I can have on the world, is to do my part to prepare two new people to take their place in it. I think we're doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah, your kids are amazing, but also I just thought of something while you said that. I feel like you, all officers to some extent, parent their crews, but I think you especially sort of parent and teach, and I don't know what the word is, develop your younger firefighters really well. Is that a philosophy that you picked up along the way, or once you became an officer, or is that from coaching?
I don't know. I think the coaching thing has helped me become a better officer. You know, when I was a line officer, and then the line officer stuff, and it doesn't even, the officer part isn't even part of it. It's just, generational firefighter. At a certain point, you have to be take the rank out of it. Doesn't matter. You're the person that is responsible for teaching and mentoring and coaching. And I suppose that for me, it was a process. It wasn't like, okay, I'm whatever years old and it's time for me to do this. It was just incrementally, little by little, like, hey man, I can help people, and become better versions of themselves. And whether that's coaching or parenting or your work environment, boy, there's a level of satisfaction to that. That, especially when you look back and say, oh, wow, I really helped these kids do this or that, or, and understand FAE or understand cutoffs, or understand double plays, and that I guess it snowballs and just becomes a habit, and yeah, it's a skill set maybe and a passion that transcends different areas of your life, and one helps the other and accentuates this and that, and so that's kind of a cool way to look at life and your role in it when it comes time for you to be that person. And everybody can. I mean, everybody at some point has to. It's the way you should be. It's not firefighting necessarily. There's all areas of life where you have a responsibility to help people develop in whatever area of life that you find your passion with: fitness, mental health, and as long as everybody keeps doing that, I suppose the whole world moves forward. Gotta be part of that wheel. There's a gear. You're a gear in that machine. You better turn. You better turn.
Well, yeah, and I guess at some point the student just metamorphosizes into the teacher, and I guess I've never thought about it, but that's amazing. Well, you mentioned FAE, which you have a real gift for teaching, I have found, but what I want to get the listeners transitioned into is, so you recently went off the line. You're not technically retired. Right. You're still working for our employer, but you're not on the line anymore. You are the head honcho in charge of our maintenance division.
That's what the business card says.
That's what head honcho in charge. So from my understanding, you don't have a 30-year history in vehicle mechanics, right?
No, I don't. A lot of shade tree stuff. When I was a kid, my dad worked on cars, my grandpa worked on cars, and I was the flashlight holder, and there was a lot of hold that thing where I'm looking, not where you're looking. But I learned a lot, and I think mostly what I learned was in that as a kid was, hey, don't be afraid to just take stuff apart and see what it's all about. And that's the way I've always been. I like to just figure things out and work on things. So I've worked on cars for a long time, not as on a professional level, but shade tree. And then a number of years ago, I was brought into the fleet. We run our own fleet maintenance, and my old two bosses ago put an email out for some help, and I answered it, and we had a cup of coffee, and he said, "Yeah, come on in, let's go." And he's retired. He's a good friend of mine, and he was a hell of a teacher. I mean, he was just the kind of person that could teach you something and tell you something mechanically and describe and explain something in a way that just it made sense. It made it click. And you weren't afraid to ask him questions. I think that's I have found, and I'm going to step into the generalization, big picture role or viewpoint here. I have found that there's a lot of obstacles to the learning environment in the fire service.
Yes.
And probably somewhere north of 85% of it is ego. Mm-hmm. And it's not good. It's not good. If you know something I don't know, you have an obligation to get me on board with what you know, not hide it and puff yourself up with your knowledge. And that was not my boss. I've had two bosses in there, and we worked part-time on a 7G basis, as it's called. And I've had two bosses that were the same way that way. Just, I don't care what you don't know. Ask me a question, man, and if I know, I'm going to get you on board. And they were Rodney and Dave,
Rodney and
Dave. They're both the same, very, very different people, but not that way. They were both the kind of people that love to help you learn. And so that was, yeah, that's how it started. And I went in there and worked and loved the work, and then started getting more hours, and then started getting leaned on more for things. And I worked in there with a guy named Kevin, he was with me, like a 7G guy, just like me. And we took on some big, heavy projects in there and had a lot of fun doing it. And we're filthy, dirty and sweaty and stinky, and had a great time. And that's how it started for me. And then that just grew. And then it was just like, wow, there's a lot of cool stuff out here. There's a lot of cool classes I can take. There's a lot of things that break that we can figure out and get back on the road. And that's where it came. That's where all that came from for me, at least in the fire emergency vehicle portion of that.
And I would like to mention that when that email went out asking for people that were interested in working in maintenance, I also responded to that email. And instead of come on in and have a cup of coffee, I got an LOL.
Well, I sent out a similar email not too long ago looking for some help, and I don't remember reading any responses from you.
Oh, I must have you on auto delete.
I don't blame you.
So once you were in there working part-time on the 7G process, I remember you taking these classes and these tests. And what was that because you have quite a few certifications now, right?
Yeah, there's a lot out there, yeah.
So what were some of these tests and classes and et cetera that you were taking?
Well, the manufacturers of almost everything so call it a heavy truck. A lot of the manufacturers offer classes on their products, and a lot of the vendors do too. And then there's some associations that you can be involved with that offer classes. And the manufacturer of the vehicles themselves offer classes. We are a Pierce Fire Department, and they have a lot of classes up there in Appleton, Wisconsin that you can jump in on, and they're very good. Anybody that's looking at this type of thing, I would, if you're a Pierce Department, I mean, I'm sure the other manufacturers do the same kind of thing. I would jump on them. They're a little expensive. Hopefully your department helps you out with that, but they do a great job up there. They have lots of props and lots of cutaways and different things, and the instructors have been top notch. And so you walk away with a lot better understanding of a lot of the stuff you've been working on. And then it's okay. Let's get a little of the finer details squared away and get somebody in front of you to ask questions to. And so they do a great job. And then the certifications and the tests, there's sort of two lines that sort of work together. There's ASE, which people are generally familiar with, which most automobile mechanics have many of those certifications. There's a whole line of certifications you can get on that end. And then there's EVT, which is similar in nature. You take these tests, and they're very similar tests. They don't offer them quite as often, but and then they work hand in hand with each other. So you have to have a number of ASE certifications and then a number of EVT, that's Emergency Vehicle Technician certifications. And if you have this combination of those, then you're level 1. And if you have these combinations, then you're level 2. And if you have this combination, you're master mechanic for fire apparatus, and then one for ambulances. And then there's a management track too. So that's the world. That's what's out there and available, and they're worth doing. They're not perfect. They're kind of like fire service tests. There's a lot of questions that are maybe not pertinent, but you can't go wing it. You got to study for them. They're kind of tough. I'm a pretty good test taker, but I can't walk in cold and expect to pass them. You got to spend a little time studying. And
I can't remember if it was you or Luke who was taking the electronics test and just like sweating it.
That was me.
That was you.
I took 2 at the same time. I took chassis electric, and I forget what the other one was. And I think the other one was maybe a little more, I can't remember, inspections or something basic. And I walked away going, I aced that one, but there's no way I passed the chassis electric one. There's no way. And I actually ended up getting a better grade on chassis electric than on the one I knew I passed. So yeah, it's good. It lends. They're not perfect. It's not a perfect system. Nothing is. But it does lend some credibility to what you're doing. You know what I mean? To be able to say, this is the time I've put into educating myself. Here's the evidence of that. It's right here on the wall. And give some credence to the idea that you're doing some brakes on something that carries 3 people with a lot of family.
Well, right. And, he said on the wall, these certificates are literally just lining the wall in the lunchroom of the maintenance building. So I'm assuming that, did you pay for those classes, or did the district, or was it kind of half and half, or did the district usually pay for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they made a really good investment.
They're really good about that, yeah.
Yeah, they made a big investment on making sure that our people were trained to work on our vehicles, which brings me to my next point. Do you think that's important, that our people are working on our vehicles?
Yeah, I think, there's
Tell me
a lot
more.
of big benefit to that. I think, well, I don't want to sound like I'm negative against some of the vendors out there that work, because we farm a lot of stuff out, stuff that we can't do. So for example, if there was a transmission problem, we're not going to tear apart one of these that big Allison transmissions. We're going to bring it to somebody who does that all day long. I mean, there's thousands of moving parts in those things. And so I certainly don't want to give any impression that those folks are less than professional with what they do. And same with any other vendor that we bring things to get work done. Springs are another example. We don't work on, we bring it to a spring shop if there's a broken spring, leaf spring or something. And they do great. Our vendors are great. We vet them though. I mean, we're not going to bring them to somebody we don't trust. But that's part of it, right? I mean, so yeah, we work on our own vehicles, and we take a little extra, we'll spend a little more time on certain things because, hey man, these guys are driving in this thing. And I think a lot of our vendors feel the same way, but there is a little something extra, I suppose, to it, like, all right, let's do this. Let's take a little time and rewire this so that it's easier the next time, because we know this is going to break again, or we know that this is a problem, or I think that there's a sense of pride too that is a big part of it. You know what I mean? So we have a direct line of communication with the operators, and I think that's important. If we were to farm all of it out, then when something breaks, maybe they put it on an email, make a list, and then when it goes in for a PM, it gets fixed, but it's just somebody fixing it. Where it's with us, it's like they can call directly and say, hey, this something's wrong with this. And we can say, all right, we're going to zip out there and take a look at it. Or, okay, we're going to put it on the list for the next PM. They can wait. Or, nope, out of service. We got to right now get it in the reserve. We can't have you driving around in that. And there's a big benefit. There's a big benefit to that relationship and that manner of doing business in that world,
Excuse me, I agree. And it's been the last 3 of our maintenance supervisors that have all come directly from the line, right?
Yeah.
3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And before that, we had a little bit different situation going on, but I just think of all of our divisions at our department, I think the maintenance one is probably the closest knit and the one that just runs smoothly because you all work together so well, even though you didn't want to work with me. So,
well, we've had a long string of people that have worked in there that have just been awesome. Mm-hmm. Just good, genuinely good people. And we recently brought in 2 other new kids that are learning the business, and they're going to fit right in. They're great. So we've been fortunate that way. I think the other divisions are largely the same way because you're like-minded people. You have similar interests. You know what's involved. You know that you're underpaid. you know that you're. There's days where it's just you're pulling your hair out and you don't feel like you got anything done. And then there's days where it's like, man, I just got 3 big victories and that vehicle's back on the road safe, and experiencing all that together, I think, is part of it. And I think that there's a fair bit of luck with just the quality of people that have come in there and wanted to be part of that because, not everybody's an ace in the world and in the fire service. That's just the truth. But man, we've just had really, really good personalities, and we get along well, and we can disagree with each other. We can talk with each other. And nobody gets heated with each other. It's great. It's great. I have a schedule, like a big calendar, right? And the 7G guys will sign up on the days they can work. And I look at it sometimes, and sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 people working. Sometimes there'll be nobody working on a particular day. And I never look at the calendar and go, oh, I always look at the calendar when there's people's initials on there and go, oh, all right, he's
Yes.
coming in today. We're going to have a good day, and that's been that way for a long time. And not a lot of people have that in their life, in their work life,
I would
So
agree.
I'm very fortunate that way. Yeah.
Well, I want to ask you one more question about maintenance before we move on a little bit to fitness. And the question is, I think this started with Uncle Foz, his sort of rules that he would put up on the board. I think, for example, never start fixing it on Friday if it's not broken. Was that one of them?
Yep. Don't. Yeah. If it's broke on Friday, don't start fixing it or
Something like that. Yeah. What's the current advice?
The
on
old
the
man
board?
is nuts. That's been up there a while, and I don't. He left in mid-March or towards the end of March. He retired, and boy, what a great guy. And that had been on there maybe a month before he retired, and I don't know that I'm not in any hurry to erase it and come up with a different phrase because the old man is nuts.
We miss Uncle Foz.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on from maintenance, and I want to talk to you. A few years ago, I want to say it was 5 years ago now, we brought in a weight loss program, and you were one of the people that participated. And, there were pros and cons with the weight loss program, but you are definitely one of the people that has kind of stuck with it and won, if that's what we want to say. So tell me what that program looked like, and then tell me what you did to make it successful. What are you doing today?
Well, the program at the time was, I guess I'm going to describe it how I looked at it, which was I need to change the way that was more oriented towards the diet end of things, which I have through that process learned exactly how important that is. Meaning you can't outwork a bad diet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was, for me, that was like, it had been a long time of me just not eating right and not exercising enough and drinking too much beer and, leading an unhealthy lifestyle generally, And I decided, it's time for a change, man. I was in my 40s and I had a couple young kids and things just needed to, all right, I got to change this. This is not going in a good, staring down the barrel of 50 and now got to make a change here. So, took it that way. Like, okay, this has got to be something that I learned. I'd never been on a diet or a fad thing or anything like that. I just, and that's why I looked at it like, okay, if this is something that I buy into as I go through this process, then it's got to be it's got to be a change, a long-term change. And that's what it's been for me. It's been, I don't know, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I think it's been 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. And I've learned a lot in that few months, and you can call it a little fad diet or whatever it was. It was just a reset, and it worked, and it was good. And then it got me exercising because, there's a synergy involved there that's like, well, I've lost a bunch of weight and I'm looking pretty good and my clothes are fitting. Well, I got to get new clothes because all my fat clothes are gone now. And well, let's take it to the next level. Let's get out a little bit. And so then that was that. And then it was, okay, well, I've never been a runner, but all of a sudden I'm going to start running. And shit, I guess I'm a runner now because it's I enjoy it. And that's where I'm at today, where, very careful about, comfortably careful, I guess, about what my diet consists of. And I understand that, hey, it isn't all like, I'm not a top tier athlete, but I understand what the food and the intake does. And I understand, it was interesting that I had a big sweet tooth back then, big chocolate and caramel guy. And that just disappeared. It took 3 months, but then it was like, all right, you're more of a savory guy now. I don't really crave and for years, I haven't really craved I'd take those Cadbury cream eggs.
Oh, those things are so gross.
Oh, God, no, those are awesome. Those are awesome. But I don't, it's like, whatever, take it or leave it at this point. Bag of Doritos, that's a different thing. But, so yeah, and then that turned into moving it up the next notch. And now I'm running, and now I'm really running a lot. And holy crap, I'm going to download an app, and now I'm going to get some headphones. And now, oh, wow, running shoes make a big difference. And now I'm hurt. Okay, I got to overcome that. That sucks. That's part of the process, though. Several weeks or months that you had to overcome an injury. And all of that together has just been a big, huge lifestyle change. I'm still running. I enjoy it a lot. I think my daughter kind of inspired me to take that on. There was one rogue 55-degree day in like January, several years, back then. And she's like, "Come on, Dad, let's go out and run." And she was running like, she'd go run 7 miles or something stupid in like, 30 minutes or something. She's crazy. I'm like, all right, I'll go. And I think I ran 2 miles. And I was back home, and I was still, and she was in the driveway, and she'd probably run 5 miles, and she's waiting for me, hardly even a sweat on her brow. And I'm like, I feel really good. I'm going to try one more. She's like, oh, just 3? Yeah. So I did one, and I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So, and then, I'm not crazy with like, I like my apps. I like the meditation that you go through when you're out by yourself running. I like basic information about my performance. I like the music, and I like my alone time, and I like the endorphins that it releases when I get back. And then the mental part, like I got to stretch. I'm tired, but I got a goal, and I got another mile, and I'm going to do it. That's cool. So that's where I'm at with all that. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool. I think my kids appreciate it. They saw the difference. They see, I feel better, sleep better, all of it. Mm-hmm. And I hope that it's made an impact on their life, like, hey, Dad's actually kind of a health nut a little bit, and he's careful about things.
Well, and the take-home message is that you were really, of the 10 people, really the only person that had long-term success because you made it a lifestyle change and not just a short temporary reset. Yeah,
well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose that the perspective that's how it had to be from the start was why that worked that way for me. You know what I mean? And that was just a recipe for long-term success. And then once it happened and the results started happening, and then I started feeling physically better, and I started looking physically better. Yeah, that's part of it. I don't give a shit about what I looked like or wore. But then it's like my daughter would tell me about this store called Marshall's, and I'm like, well, what's Marshall's? It's clothes. All right, I'll take you there. And then I'm like, well, this would fit me now, and this looks pretty good.
Oh, are you a fashionista?
No,
now?
Not really, but not really.
Well, this brings me to the question, since you are working a day position now, you are sleeping every night. Mm-hmm. How's that for you?
Yeah, that's really something.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, on a common sense level, and there's some awareness of the sleep deprivation and the sleep issues in the fire service. But then when you experience it and you kind of come back to like, they say it's going to take a couple months and then you'll really, well, it was about that, not even quite that long before that regular rhythm of sleeping. What do they call that? Circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
I felt better right away, but then in a couple months, it's like, and then I had a bad night's sleep one night before work, on a work night. I just tossed and turned all night for whatever reason.
Oh, were you so irritated?
Well, I was, but then the next day driving in, and I drive in real early to get my run in, and I'm driving in like, oh, today's going to be hell. And I tolerated it, come 9, 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm not that cranky and tired. Well, I think that was because I had this big long pattern of good, solid sleep that I could tolerate a night of bad sleep or something like that. And that was kind of an eye opener. So yes, it's quite something to be able to be in your own bed every night and get the weekends off and get into a regular sleep rhythm. It's
I can't wait.
I'm not a kid anymore, and it's that's a big plus on the going on days side for sure.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are coming to the part of the podcast where I say either one, was there something that a rabbit hole we should have gone down that I blew it and I forgot? Or two, is there some parting advice or maybe a little bit of a summary you want to leave the listeners with?
should have given me a list of these questions before so I could have prepared a little bit.
So much more organic.
I got pearls of wisdom that I need to work on before I start these interviews.
I know, but
I have so many of them.
We had just a couple weeks ago when I asked you to do this, we sat at your desk in maintenance and talked for 45 minutes, and you just spewed wisdom.
No. If you were to say to me, what's the one thing that you can, one piece of advice you can give somebody, anybody, young people, new people, old people, whatever, I would say, how do I phrase this? Learn to live through the lens. Learn to look at life through the lens of what to be grateful for.
Oh, damn, that's good. Learn to look at life through the lens of what to be grateful for.
Well, it's kind of important, there's a lot of, I think we're sorely lacking in gratitude in the world generally, especially among, God, I'm going to sound like old man grandpa here, but the younger generation, look at some of the things that we have in our lives that work and work well, that no other generation has had, no other time in any time period in life have you been able to walk around outside with a device on your hand that has access to every piece of practical information known to mankind since the beginning of time. I mean, that's pretty special.
That's pretty cool.
Right? And I just think that if you were to, even when things go awry or go downhill for you or sideways on something, it has just a lot to be, even if it's just being on this side of the grass for the day, that's something,
Yeah.
And so I think if you start to live your life with that in mind, like, okay, this sucks right now, but what do I get to be grateful for? And exercise that, then it becomes a habit. And then the hard times roll away a little bit easier. And that's something that's served me well my whole life, My grandma, had a little Norwegian grandma. Mm-hmm. She passed away just not that long ago, 2016. Yeah. So she was 90-something, 92, I think. 92, 93. And her thing was exercise the discipline of gratitude every day. Okay, do it.
That's a good one.
Yeah, do it.
That's a good one.
I mean, that infers a lot if you think deeply about what exercising means to something and what a discipline means. You take those words literally and say, it's a process. You got to work at it every day. And if you exercise that discipline every day, it changes your viewpoint, changes your worldview.
Well, and I think that the fire service is in an interesting pot of people because of the personalities that we draw, the type A personalities driven. Because if you're not type A driven personality, you're probably not going to make it in the fire service. But also I think that there's this aspect of we operate from a place of shame, meaning when we do something wrong on the fire scene, there's not a lot of let's, talk about it and be positive. It's a lot of shaming people for it. Like, that's just what we do. That's how we operate.
I grew up in the fire service, and it sucked, and it was not an effective learning strategy.
No.
So if any of your listeners want some good reading, do a little research on something called crew resource management.
Crew resource management. I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, and how people that are much smarter than us have discovered that, hey, we're humans and we're going to make mistakes, and the management of those mistakes is kind of important. And just pissing people off when they make mistakes, all that does is shut them down and hide their mistakes. Mm-hmm. Instead, why don't we make the crew better? Why don't we make the team better by saying, hey, I screwed this up. I made a mistake. This was not good. But I don't want it to happen to you. So I'm going to shout it from the mountaintops, even though I'm embarrassed about it.
Yes.
Then what?
Yes.
Then how would you feel if you retired and you did some boneheaded thing, maybe on a pump or whatever? You made some boneheaded mistake. and you found out 5 years after you retired, somebody that you worked directly with made the same mistake.
Because I was
Well,
too
isn't that
ashamed
on
to
you?
tell someone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on you to some degree, and maybe on the environment to a large degree, because that has an impact on how we operate individually, right? And so, yeah, I mean, that's a big, and so it's not exactly a celebration of your mistakes.
Right.
That's not the point. Exactly. The point is that it is an opportunity, right, to make everybody better, right? And I think you got to jump on that sword every once in a while and just raise your hand and say, ooh, boy, did I screw this one up? Or if it's something minor, or if it's something you got away with. Like, I made a mistake, but it turned out okay, but it could have gone really bad.
Yes.
Let's learn. Let's take this as a learning point. And I think the EMS side of things, I think, has gotten better at that, at least in our system. The fire service generally and at least in our little world, I think is really heading that way. And I think that's great. Long ways to go.
Yeah.
Long ways to go. But yeah, crew resource management is a big part of that. Threat and error management, how to handle all those things, and it's taking that hard line where it's just shame on you for making mistakes to, okay, what can we learn from this? And that's a big transition for what you're saying, from a culture that was like exactly like what you're saying. You should know thing. Yes, there are some basic competencies that everybody should be well off with. Okay. But to say you should know and you're my mentor means that you should have taught me. And if I don't know, that's on you.
Dang, that's good.
Helps both ways, though. Because if you're the person that's supposed to be teaching, well, you got to eat that shit too sometimes. And I've done it a million times. Like, God damn it, that guy doesn't know that. That's my fault. Mm-hmm. I do it in baseball all the time. If you don't know how to turn a double play, or what your assignment is in this certain situation, that's because I didn't do a good enough job teaching you. And maybe I got to revise the way I communicate to get you on board. But that's on me, not on the student. Just, you know what I mean? To a large degree. And if you can make that switch, hey man, the team's better. Put that ahead of yourself. Set your ego aside and get people better.
Well, I've been trying to do something.
Not you and it's
No, me. But I have been trying to do something at the station, which I find it's habitual in the fire service. We just love to talk about each other. And especially if it's something embarrassing or something, we just love to talk about each other. And so I challenged my crew this year to, if you have something to say to someone, say it to their face, because that's the only way anything's going to change. And if you don't have something nice to say when they're not here, let's not say it. Like, it's just not a good atmosphere to just sit around the table all day and talk about people that aren't there.
Yeah.
So we have good days and bad days at it, but I think overall it's positive.
That's good. Yeah. Yeah. What that reminds me of is a lot of times there were certain people that would go out of town for incidents and then come back and talk shit about how bad that other department was.
Yes.
And sometimes maybe I've experienced it where if I had to talk shit, it was fair, but I try not to because, unless that's a difficult thing in some regards, but maybe the perspective should be, here's what we're doing right and what I'm seeing out in the world that we're doing much better at. But that doesn't mean you got to, necessarily, and especially when it's within your department, like what good does it do? Like, hey, worry about you. Worry about what you can control. Yeah. Talking shit about other people doesn't really help the team.
I don't think so.
Nah. It's toxic. Can be toxic. Yeah.
We just used a buzzword. Toxic.
I know. It's a buzzword, but it's a good one.
It is a good one. Well, I want to be respectful for your time. You've been at baseball practice and you have to go home. I'm assuming you're having dinner with your family. So
yeah, I got a date with my daughter, I think. I think we're gonna go out and do something. Everybody else is out, so
where are you going?
I don't know. She's gonna figure out some dinner or something. I don't know.
Joe and I have this voice we do for his daughter.
Yeah,
does she know?
She will if she hears this. It's not really accurate either, but it's just what we do.
It's just what we do. We also say, I got this from my mom. I don't know why we started saying it to each other, but we always, instead of saying, what are you doing? We just say, Doing.
Doing.
All right. Well, listeners, thanks for listening to this episode. Joe, I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Is it okay to put your contact information in the show notes?
Sure, yeah.
All right. So if someone reaches out, you can give them some more pearls of wisdom. I'll put your contact information in the show notes. And with that, this has been AZ and Joe, and we are out.